Brace yourself. Gonna blast up anytime now. Collect yourself. Things will never be the same in this sad, sad world.
Good morning and welcome to Humanities class. We are coming at you with a bonus episode right in the middle of catch-up week. I hope this catch-up week is giving you the chance to, catch up, that you're knocking out some of the assignments that you might have fallen behind on, and that this gives you an opportunity to succeed. I'm also taking advantage of the time. There are some really important things that I had fallen behind on, such as not getting dressed and not showering. And as you can see, Catch-up Week has given me the opportunity to really do some hard work in those two very important areas. I have to laugh every time we have a live video conference and I have like two faces on the screen and 20 people who won't turn their cameras on because they're afraid they don't look their best, and they think they're the only people in the world who don't look their best 6 years into a quarantine and not having left the house. Here's a message of hope for you. Someday you will be 40 and you won't care anymore. So you have that to look forward to. I want to explore a special topic with you this morning that some of you may be curious about. We've gotten to know Aristotle. We're getting to know what Aristotle thinks about a lot of things. We're beginning to see how Aristotle's thoughts have influenced the way our culture has developed, specifically how people ignoring Aristotle for hundreds of years influenced us to go one way, and then when he's finally rediscovered some 1500 or so years after he dies, the impact that has on our culture is that kickstarts the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, the technological revolution, the scientific revolution. All of that comes from Aristotle, but only long, long after he's dead, because most of us didn't listen to him when we had the chance. Some people might be curious what Aristotle thinks about things like the soul, life after death, and at the top of the list, God. What does Aristotle think about the soul, life after death, and God? We're going to explore those questions for a few minutes this morning. I want to point out, I've pointed this out a number of times, but it's important to hear. In a school setting, when we talk about things that have a religious feel to them, the purpose is to understand what influential people thought. The purpose is not to tell you or me what we should think. When it comes to the soul, the afterlife, and God, we're going to look at what Aristotle thought. It's not a way of saying you need to think what he thinks. Because you can't expect Aristotle, regardless of what our perspective on those questions is, you can't expect Aristotle to have the same opinions that most of us have. Aristotle lives 300 years before Christ. Aristotle lives 900 years before Muhammad. So he is completely uninfluenced by the two largest religions on earth today. Never heard of them, because they didn't exist yet. Judaism exists, but at that time, it is the religion of the people in the nation of Judea. If Aristotle has any familiarity with Jewish ideas or with the Jewish Bible, he doesn't talk about it. So that does not seem to have an influence on him. So his ideas may seem foreign to us, and that's okay. We're not here to be converted to what Aristotle thinks. We're here to understand what Aristotle thinks. So let's start with the soul. You remember Plato's vision of the soul probably sounded very familiar. Plato thinks the soul is a real thing that is inside of you. It's not a physical thing, but it's a real thing that exists. In fact, it's your true self, and it will live on after you die. If that sounds familiar, that's because Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, in large part, got their idea of what the soul is, in part from Plato. Now, Plato believes the soul existed before your body. Plato believes in reincarnation, just like the religions in the East. I may not even be pointing east. I'm just pointing there. Just like Buddhism, Hinduism, Plato believes in reincarnation. So your soul comes from above, has lived many lives, will go on to live many more lives until you get it right. That's different from what the most common religions in our culture teach. But what the soul actually is, Plato's ideas are very familiar. Aristotle looks at the soul very differently. For Aristotle, the soul is your form. He says the soul is the form of the body. Now, what does form mean for Aristotle? Form is simply the collected list of your characteristics and traits. And those characteristics and traits, or that form, gives you all your potential and all your powers. You have the power to do all the stuff that human beings can do because of your characteristics and traits. In other words, because of your form. In other words, because of your soul. So for Aristotle, the soul is not a thing that actually exists. It's the name we give to your characteristics and traits. Very different from Plato. If you're a bag of pretzels, Plato says your body is the bag, and your soul, the much more important part, are the pretzels inside the bag. Both of them are things that exist, but the more important, and for Plato more real, are the pretzels inside. That's your soul. And in a sense, your body has trapped your soul. And just like these pretzels have to escape the bag to live up to their true potential, which is being eaten by me. You guys just have to watch me for a second. I didn't plan this out well. Your soul has to escape your body in order to reach its true potential, which is, after enough successful lives, living in bliss forever in this other realm, the world of forms. That's Plato. Hang on. With the magic of technology, I'm going to pause this until I swallow. Okay, so I kind of ate the whole dang bag and then took a nap for 6 hours. But we're back. Aristotle's vision of soul is different. So let's take this now empty bag of pretzels and I wad it up and I form it into a ball. All right? And now I have a ball. What kind of matter is this ball made out of? Pretzel bag. What kind of form is it? Well, I formed it into the ball. The soul is the form for Aristotle. The characteristics of ballness that this ball possesses. Okay? But those characteristics are not a thing that actually exists. And it certainly doesn't exist without the matter. I have pretzel bag formed into a ball. If the pretzel bag is destroyed, the form of ball is destroyed. There's no ball anymore if there's no pretzel bag. That's Aristotle's vision of soul as the form of the body. And it also gives us a clue to Aristotle's vision of the afterlife. Plato has a vivid and vibrant picture of what happens after you die, and in fact before you were born, and that your soul is immortal and eternal, and it has this destiny. That will be very familiar to us who know about religious ideas of the soul, both East and West. Christianity, Islam, Judaism, also Hinduism, Buddhism, traditional religions, just about every religious perspective has some vision of living on after you die. Your soul, which is a real thing, going somewhere and doing something. Aristotle does not share that vision. If the soul is the form of the body for Aristotle, the form cannot exist without the matter. So when your body dies, so does your soul. Just like I have a pretzel bag in the form of a ball, if I destroy the pretzel bag, the form of a ball is also destroyed. When your body is destroyed, the form of your body is destroyed. Therefore, your soul is destroyed. Aristotle does leave himself open to think that your power of thought in some way can live on after your death, but no longer as you. It would be united with all other thinkers' powers of thought into one great mind or power of thought. Even that is not clear. Aristotle tends, in his focus on physical things, and in his fear that if people knew what he truly thought about the gods of ancient Greece, they might try to kill him, like they did try to kill him, he keeps quiet about that quite a bit. All right. Let's go to the top of the list. What does Aristotle think about God? We remember, I hope, that for Plato, at the top of reality is something called the One. Perfect being, perfect goodness, everything else comes out of the One. And the One is Plato's way of talking about what people today mean when they use the word God. So for Plato, God is real. You might be suspecting that Aristotle thinks differently, but actually he doesn't. Aristotle's opinion of God is going to sort of cut a middle path, and middle paths are very important for Aristotle. Aristotle's opinion of God is going to cut a middle path between what people who are very religious, and religion is very important to them, how they view God, and then for how people who don't think that there's a God. Aristotle takes a position in the middle, which means whichever side of that divide you fall on, you're about to be unhappy with Aristotle. Aristotle says, yes, there is a God. And he describes God a lot like Plato does, and a lot like religions today do. Perfect being, perfectly good, all-knowing, all-powerful, the whole 9 yards. Yep, for Aristotle, that God is real. Aristotle would say that God has to be real because the universe has to have a start. He thinks the universe is eternal, but the universe is constantly changing. So that change has to have something that gets the ball rolling. Change is another way of talking about motion. If when my full pretzel bag changed into an empty pretzel bag, it's because the pretzels were moving in this direction. Change is motion. Aristotle says there is a prime mover, a first mover, something that started the chain reaction of changes that we experience as living in time in the universe. He says there has to be a first cause, because everything that happens has a cause. Everything that comes to be has a reason for its being. So there has to be a cause at the start of this chain that caused everything, but that itself simply is. That first cause is an uncaused cause, a necessary being that produces all the beings that come after it. So far, this is what, any monotheistic religion anyway would say about God. So Aristotle's on your side, if that's you, so far. But Aristotle does not, and Aristotle respects this God as the greatest possible being. But Aristotle doesn't worship God. Aristotle doesn't pray. Aristotle doesn't think that God loves you. In fact, Aristotle doesn't think God knows that you exist. God doesn't answer your prayers, Aristotle says. God barely knows the universe exists. What? Why, if God is perfect, why is there stuff he doesn't know? Aristotle says since God's a perfect being, the only thing worth his time to think about is himself. Everything that is not God is beneath God's notice for Aristotle. Later, people who follow in Aristotle's tradition are going to say, we're not so sure about that, and they're going to make his ideas line up more with traditional religious ideas of God. But for Aristotle himself, that's what he says. God is real. God's the cause for everything. God made you as a first cause, but he didn't take time to notice. So that's Aristotle on the soul, the afterlife, and God. There will be a 5-question assignment to go with this video. That is optional. This is catch-up week. Nothing I'm posting this week is mandatory. I tell you after you watched the video. I gotta see those numbers go up for the sake of my tiny fragile ego. All right, thanks a lot. I will talk to you next time.
Around a lot a bit, trying to make the pieces fit to a puzzle with a million missing pieces. When I'm feeling fine is when I discover that I'm afraid to blow my cover, and there's something very wrong with this. So sit back in your home, or get back in your cave. If I'm going down, I'm taking someone with me.